So today on the O2R we're talking about bus routing and direct outs, and I've got my notes here, and I've also got this PowerPoint here to kind of help us with things. And then later on after that we will be talking about headphone mixing in the O2R, which is still talking about routing and stuff like that, just kind of how routing works in the O2R. It's not, the headphone mixing is not super different from the Audient. It's just you have to kind of know where to go for the headphone mixes in the O2R, but the concepts are still the same. And the other thing I want to go over today is kind of going over how effects work and stuff like that, just to make sure we're good with effects and we understand how effects work. So that's what we're doing today: bus routing, direct outs, effects, and then we'll be talking about the headphone mix as well a little bit later. All right. So the first thing to understand is routing is taken care of in the here, let me pull it up. Let's see, where are we? Right there. So routing is taken care of in the selected channel area. It's this area right here, and it's over here on the left hand side. This routing section here is where we take care of all the routing stuff. So in this area here, you'll notice, let me just zoom in on this. You'll notice, let me pull up this arrow key as well. So what you'll notice is that you've got this routing section here, and you've got your display button here so you can see your routing on the screen. And then you've got all these numbers here, 1 through 8, because there are 8 buses. And then you have the stereo to send it to your stereo mix. You've got the direct button here to send it direct out, so that goes to your multi-track recorder. And you've got the follow pan button here. So when you're setting up routing on the O2R, it's actually not super difficult if you've kind of internalized how the Audient works and you're getting more an idea about how like routing matrices work and stuff like that. So you've got number 1 here is the stereo button. This sends the track signal to the stereo mix bus. It is on by default. So all you have to do is just pull up a channel, and you're going to start hearing it in your stereo mix out. You don't have to hit the button or anything like that. Remember, on the Audient or other boards, you do have to hit that mix button. On the O2R, you do not have to hit that mix button. Then you have the direct button here. This sends the signal to the channels direct out to the multi-track recorder. That's this one right here. Then number 3 is you've got the bus routing for subgroup mixing. These send the signal to the buses. And then number 4 over here, you've got the follow pan button, and you press this to engage panning for the channel during busing. Now I noticed that a couple of students yesterday did actually manage to route a signal to the buses, which is pretty cool. You routed the drums to the buses, and you realize it's not that hard to do. It's great that you did it. It wasn't required yesterday, but you did it, and that's pretty cool stuff. All right, so how do we record to the multi-track recorder? Well, on the O2R, there's a couple steps. On the O2R, first you set the input level, and then you go to the routing section and engage the direct button for the channel. Then you disengage the stereo button for the channel. So what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that if you want to send signal to your O2R, to your Pro Tools setup, what you're going to do is you're going to disengage the stereo signal here, and you're going to engage the direct part right here. When you do that, what it's going to do is it's going to send the signal out of its direct out, and every channel has a direct out. And then it's going to disengage the signal to the stereo mix bus. And what that's going to basically do is just stop your double monitoring. No more double monitoring. So that's what that one does there. Now on Pro Tools, what you have to do is you have to set up a track, get a new audio track. It should be a mono audio track. And your input should say digital 1 or A.1 or A.A1 or something like that. But it'll be like whatever channel you're coming from on the O2R will be the same thing you're going to have on your Pro Tools setup. And different studios are going to have it labeled differently. You just have to kind of figure out what it's labeled. Ours, we have A and B, so we have A.A1, A.A2, A.A3, A.A4, like that, and then A.B1, B2, B3, B4. Now, B1 would be number 9, channel 9, B2 would be channel 10, B3 would be channel 11, and so on. So make sure your inputs and outputs say the same thing. They don't have to say the same thing, but it's good if they do say the same thing. And it should just be whatever channel is on the O2R. Then make sure you engage the input monitoring for the track in Pro Tools. That's the little I that's there. Just make sure you engage that I that's there. Then on the O2R, go over to layer 25 through 48. Bring up the fader for the correct channel. Remember, the stereo button is on by default. So when you go back into the O2R, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the O2R, push that layer 25 through 48 button, push the select button for whatever track you're on, and just turn it up. You don't have to push that select button actually, but if you wanted to push the select button just so you can make sure everything's doing the right thing, then you could. And when you push that select button, what you're going to be looking at is all of this information here for that channel, and the stereo button should be on by default. And that's really it. I mean, I know it maybe seems kind of complicated when you're thinking about it, when you're not touching anything, but once you get in there and you see somebody who knows what they're doing, pushing the buttons and stuff, you'll notice there's actually not a whole lot going on. There's only, what is this? It's only 6 different steps. Set the input level, go to your routing section, turn on the direct button, turn off the stereo button, set up your track in Pro Tools, make sure your inputs and outputs are set up correctly. Push the input monitoring button for the track. If you want to record it, push the record enable button as well. Then go back to the O2R, change your layer to 25 through 48, and just turn up the fader. You don't even need to select that channel because the stereo button's already going to be on by default. When you bring up that fader, you will be hearing the signal. You should be hearing the signal. If you're not hearing the signal, that means you made a mistake somewhere. So there's really not that many steps. People get caught up in it because it's new and everything, but once you've done it a couple times, it's really not terribly difficult. All right. So that's sending our signal to our multi-track recorder. If we want to send signal to the buses, now remember, when we're busing stuff, this is primarily for monitoring the monitor path, not for the input path. On the input path, you're really not going to use your buses too much unless you're doing something live. But if you're in the studio, you're not going to use your busing so much. You would use your busing, sorry, if you're in the studio, you wouldn't use your busing on the input path, you would use it on the monitor path more. Busing is more for just like listening, like using it for live situations or broadcast situations, things like that. We really don't need to use it much for a recording situation unless you did want to bring in several channels and send them to one input on your computer. You can bus them for that kind of stuff. But sending a signal to the buses for our monitor path, step number 1, you disengage the stereo button for the channel. So let's say I've got a whole bunch of things that are coming in. They're all going to say stereo. They're all going to have the stereo button turned on here. So we disengage that stereo button for all the channels. Let's say you've got some drums coming in there on channels 25. Let's say you've got 4 drum mics, 25, 26, 27, and 28. So those 4 drum mics on 25, 26, 27, 28, you'd make sure you've got your layer selected for 25 through 48, and then you'd push the select button for each channel individually, and that's going to be located. Let's see if we can get over to where that's listed. There we go. That's going to be located down here. Right over here. So the select buttons are these ones across the top here. And so you're just going to select the select button for the channel you want. So channel 25, 26, 27, and 28 right here. You push the select button for 25, and you go up here to your routing section, and you push the stereo button to disengage it, and then you push the 1 and 2 buttons to send it to buses 1 and 2. So engage the routing, disengage the stereo bus for the channel or channels, and engage the routing number for the buses you want to send to channel to B1 to send to. Engage the routing numbers for the buses you want to send to. So if I want to send to buses 1 and 2, I just turn off my stereo button and I turn on buses 1 and 2. Now, why do I turn off the stereo button? It's so we can make sure that we're not double monitoring. We got to make sure that we're not double monitoring here. So we turn off that stereo button, and you push the bus's routing numbers for bus 1 and 2. And you do that for every channel. So 25, turn off the stereo button, engage buses 1 and 2. 26, turn off the stereo button, engage buses 1 and 2. 27, turn off the stereo button, engage buses 1 and 2. 28, turn off the stereo button, engage buses 1 and 2. If you want to pan the signal, engage the follow pan button. So if you want to pan those microphones around between buses 1 and 2, push that follow pan button, and then you pan however you want to. Then you go to your master layer and check the bus levels. Now remember, the master layer, still in the same faders here, but the master layer is this button right here. It says master on it, and then our buses are these right over here. Now the buses are actually going to be off by default. So you're going to link. You're going to turn them on. Down here, step number 7 is you turn them on, and number 5, 6, and 7, these can be turned on, or these can be done in any kind of order you want down here. But step number 5, I have it set for linking the bus channels. So you just hold down the select button for one and push the select button for the other one. Then you pan them left and right, and then you go to the stereo page in the routing section and turn the bus channels on. Make sure they are on. Okay. And that's it. It's just those 7 steps. So step number 1, you turn off the stereo button for the channel. Step number 2, you engage the routing number for the buses you want to send to, and that's all done right here. That's all done right here, 1 and 2. Step number 3 is you engage the follow pan button if you want to pan the signal. Step number 4, go to the master layer and check the bus levels. Step number 5, link them. Step number 6, pan them. And step number 7, turn them on so they go to the right place. Okay. All right, and here's a little walkthrough of this. Oh wait, here's our, before we get to that walkthrough, the internal reverb setup. Actually, let's go and do that little walkthrough right here. And here, okay, so this is in the PDF. It's on Canvas, sending bus outs to the stereo out. Bus outs can be routed to the stereo out buses as follows. Bus out to stereo out settings can be stored in the bus to stereo library, which contains 1 preset memory and 32 user memories. See bus to stereo library on page 14. Well, that's not, you don't have that page. So step number 1, use the selected channel routing display button to locate the bus to stereo page. So selected channel routing, that is going to be right over here, the routing section right here. Right there, you're going to use that, hit that button, and it pulls up this bus to stereo page. So you can hit this bus to stereo page here. And in here, you've got your pan. You can use your arrow keys to navigate around and use the scroll wheel to change the panning, turn them on and off, hit the enter key to turn them on. See, this is what they look like right here when they're on, and this is what they look like when they're off. And then you can adjust the level there as well. Use the cursor buttons to select this, to select the parameters, and use the parameter wheel, increase, decrease buttons, and enter button to set them. Pan controls the bus out signals between the left and right stereo buses. They're going to be set to the center initially. Just pan them left and right, on off, turn them on and off, and then faders used to set the stereo outlet levels. And then you can just hit the enter key on the fader when you have the fader selected, and it just puts it up to 0 immediately. Okay, if we want to view the bus out settings, you can view them, you can name them. Yeah, and that's about it really. I mean, it's actually, there's not a whole lot to go on. The hardest part about this probably is just remembering to do this, and also just finding them. So, you know, that's the part. You're going to have to keep your notes with you and your book with you. One thing I saw yesterday with quite a few people was that not everybody was pulling out their notes. People were actually coming to me and asking questions first, and I'd rather you not do it like that. I'd rather you actually consult your notes before you come talk to me. Just because if you're coming and asking me all the questions before you try to figure it out for yourself, or before you try to consult your notes, you don't really internalize it the same way. We actually learn stuff better by kind of putting our hands on it and doing it ourselves. And asking me questions is great when you're completely stuck. But really, after I teach the lesson, I'd almost rather be the last resort. Not that I won't help you, I absolutely will help you, but I'd kind of rather you struggle a little bit and try to figure it out for yourself, because that way you're going to remember it. You're going to learn it and you're going to remember it. If I just help you with every single thing, that's going to be a lot harder to internalize it. And it wasn't like any one person in particular that came and asked me about stuff. It was actually a few of you who came and asked me about stuff, and that's fine, but I would prefer if you kind of consult your notes before you come to me. So, like, you know, make sure you have your notes in your room. Make sure you always have your iPad in the room with you with the notes on it. Have this in there, because this will definitely help out. And then Crispy says, I was a little confused, a little turnaround on which notes to consult. Absolutely, and that's totally fine as well. So, you know, like I said, I'm not upset with anybody coming and asking me. Just embrace the struggle a little bit. That's all. So let's go over here to the next part here and talk about setting up an internal reverb setup. So this is something we didn't really talk about too much yesterday at all. Actually, we didn't talk about this at all. Actually, before we, well, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And then I want to come back and make sure we talk about the EQ and the compression a little bit here. EQ and compression is actually quite easy. The EQ is just always on the O2R on each channel. Yeah, get used to using the iPad. Not sure how to be fast enough to consult electronic notes. Still old school paper and pencil guy here. Absolutely, but I think the yeah, we can actually have a talk about that, and I can show you some things in there, because the notes in the iPad, the one thing I really like about using stuff in the iPad, and the reason why I like using iBooks and stuff rather than old school books, even though I like holding a book and I like the feel of a book and I like having a book in my hands, I can't search a book the same way that I can search my iPad. I was actually having a discussion about this with my friends in the car over the weekend. And my one friend was saying, yeah, you know, when I read books, I always put a whole bunch of Post-it notes in them to mark pages and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's great. What I do is I just highlight it with my finger, and then I can search for a certain word later. So, for example, we were talking about Buddhism and like the kind of the history of Buddhism, and I remembered it was in one of these books. So it was like kind of a synopsis of it, and then I can go in there and I can just type in Buddhism into the search thing, and it just pops up all my parts that I've highlighted that have the word Buddhism in it, and it's great. Knowing how to search stuff is super fantastic, but if you're not using it like that, then of course it can be very frustrating. And one of the cool things about my notes, and I just have to double check this and see if it translates to the PDF, because it's something I actually haven't checked. Let's see. Let's just see here real quick. Let's see if I type in reverb here. Yeah. So you see this? If I type in reverb into my search up here in the upper right hand corner, see how it highlights everything that says reverb? Even though this is handwritten, this note app that I use actually translates my handwriting into text that's searchable text. So even though it's my handwriting, one of the reasons why I love this is because you can actually search it in your iPad or on your computer. So if you're looking for example, how to set up the bus, yeah. So we can do this, and you can just type in the word bus, and boom, it pops it up, and it goes over to here, and you can see all these pages that say the word bus in it. So it'll take you right to where you need to go. If we said, for example, let's go in here, which one is this? Headphone mix, and let's see if there's the word guitar in here. No word guitar. Let's see, I don't even know what I have in this headphone mix one here. I don't have the word guitar in here. Okay, let's do a search for the word layer. If I want to see where I use the word layer in here, boom, there's the word layer select, press and hold the layer button. Pretty dope stuff, right? I mean, it's like this technology is, you know, I even know this stuff exists, and I'm still like amazed by how awesome it works. Like really amazed by how well it works. So, and that's one of the reasons why I love using these notes like this, is because you can search them. It's really super cool. All right, anyway, let's continue on here. Let's talk about adding a reverb, how the internal reverb setup works. So there are 4 internal effects in the O2R, and any one of these 4 internal effects can be used for reverbs or delays or choruses or whatever. And they're all stereo, and they all have a normal position on here. Remember how on the Audient, our aux number 1 is normal to the MIDI verb reverb, and that comes back into stereo input number 1. That's what we call normal. And normal just means the default setting for something. So these are already normaled for you to aux sends, and their returns are normaled to channels 49 through 56. So if we go in here, aux 1 and 2 sends to effect number 1. That in turn comes back to 49 and 50. Aux 3 and 4 goes to effect 2, which comes back to channel 51 and 52. Aux 5 and 6 are going to effect 3, which comes back to 53 and 54. Aux 7 and 8 goes to effect 4, which comes back to 55 and 56. So if I wanted to add reverb to a snare drum, for example, let's say my snare drum is on channel 2 in Logic, so that means it's going to come back into the O2R on channel 26. Remember, layer 25 through 48 is the monitor path. So step number one is make sure my aux number one is selected. See, the aux select section is right here. Step number two is change the fader mode to aux. Change that fader mode to aux. This will make all the faders control the aux1 send amount for their respective channels. Then add reverb to the snare. Step three, ensure you have the correct layer selected. So we have to make sure that we select 25 through 48. Step number four, adjust the fader for the snare drum. You can start by pushing it to 0 dB. Just push it up to 0 dB. And then step number five is repeat steps 1 and 4 for aux number 2, because that's going to send it to the other side of the thing. Now, I think the inputs are set up actually as mono. I don't think the inputs really matter so much, so you could just use aux number 1, and you don't have to use aux number 1 and 2, even if it's a stereo snare drum or a mono snare drum. Then we get to step number 6 here. We're going to set up our reverb return. So we're going to bring the reverb back so we can hear it. All those steps 1 through 5 are setting up the send. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up our return so we can actually hear it. So we go to the master layer, then change the fader mode to fader, away from aux. So it's set to aux, which is sending our send amounts for our auxes. We're going to change it to fader, so it's going to return it back in. That's going to set up our level for how much our fader, how much we're hearing that reverb. Turn up the faders for channels 49 and 50 because we are using effect number 1. If we were using effect number 2, we'd set for channels 51 and 52, and if we were using effect number 3, we'd be 53, 54, and effect number 4 would be 55 and 56. Then you got to make sure you link them together, because that way we can just use one fader to control both of them, hold the select on one and press it on the other, and then pan them left and right. Remember to set your pan to inverse gang. Okay, well, that's something we talked about yesterday, so just on the last day of lessons, so just make sure you consult the video for that as well, inverse gang. Okay, and that's it for setting up that effects. Okay, so over here, there's this, it's all in here in this thing here. So we can see here, let's go over here to setting the aux send mode. So this aux send mode is kind of a deeper dive into this. Aux sends have two operating modes, variable and fixed, which can be set individually for each of the 8 aux sends. In variable mode, aux send levels are variable, and the signal source point can be either pre-fader or post-fader. And fixed mode, aux send levels are fixed at nominal, and the signal source point is fixed to post-fader. So we have our setup actually in variable mode. Use the aux display button to select the aux sends page. The aux send parameters for the 56 input channels are divided among 3 pages. The input channel 1 through 24 aux send page is shown below. Variable mode is here, left and right. And it's actually variable mode is on the right, not the left, and fixed mode is on the left. The layout of the other 2 pages is the same, so that text is a little bit backwards from what it's here in the picture. On the fixed mode page, global post is displayed in the lower right hand corner, indicating the aux send pre-post parameter is fixed at post. So we can use this for all the aux channels 1 through 8 and use those aux select buttons to do that, and then use the cursor and fix buttons and then press the select a mode. When the aux mode is changed, the parameters of the select aux channel is set as follow. Change from variable to fixed, set to nominal, and then set from fixed to variable, they're set to infinity. Now if we want to set up our aux send levels, we can set them using the faders or the encoders. I personally prefer to use the faders, not the encoders. So using the faders, use the layer buttons to select the layers. Press the fader mode aux button to select the aux fader mode. Use the aux select aux 1 through 8 buttons to select aux sends 1 through 8, and then use the faders to set the aux send levels. Refer to the legend on the left side of the faders when setting aux send levels. So press the fader mode button to select the aux fader mode. So what that is right over here. Let's see if we can get to where it says. That's over here. So this one here, see where it says fader mode right here across this over here? That's these 2 buttons here, and if we go look at it, that's this part here. So see how it says fader and aux? If you push this to say aux, what's going to happen is, here, let's just see, right over here. So if we push it to say aux, like in this step here, what's going to happen is all of your faders are going to go automatically. They're going to go down like that because remember they're motorized, and then that means you're going to be setting 0 signal to your aux send. And what you have to do is you have to turn each fader up for that particular channel to send signal to the aux send. So if you want to hear more reverb for a snare drum, for example, if the snare drum is on channel 2 in Logic, it'll be coming into channel 26 on the O2R. So you have to turn that fader up. You have to push that fader up, and that'll be sending more signal to your reverb on effect number 1. Okay, cool. And that's the end of that part right there. I know I'm going through it pretty fast, but again, it's something that you really need to experience to understand what's going on in a deeper kind of way. If you want to use your encoders, use the layer buttons to select the layers, press the encoder mode aux button to select the aux encoder mode, and then use the aux select buttons to select aux sends 1 through 8, and then you can use your encoders to set the aux send levels. I'm not a huge fan of using the encoders for this because I feel like I have to turn them kind of too much. Nico says his lecture makes so much more sense after touching the console. I 100% agree. Yeah, it really does make a lot more sense after you've gone in and kind of touched it. And then Crispy says, "Whoa, what?" But it's making some sense. Yeah, it takes time. It does take time to get it to so it's like fully like, oh yeah, I get it, and it's okay. Everybody kind of gets it at different speeds and stuff like that. But I know that Nico, you have used quite a bit of consoles in your days. It sounds like you've actually done a lot of work with like mixing desks and stuff like that. Maybe not a ton, but probably more than Crispy. So this stuff is kind of maybe gonna sit in a little bit quicker. All right. So let's just go over here, make sure we're good with this stuff. Okay, what I want to do real quick is I want to show you. Oh, it's the first time you've ever used anything, even like a little small mixer. I thought you had said you have a mixer at your house. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video recording right now, actually.